Are we good? Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the task force on the implementation of the pupil weighting factors report. And I'm Senator Ruth Hardy. Today is Friday, November 19th, I believe. And we're going to get started. Thank you for being with us. Everyone, there are lots of documents that were just posted to our website with printouts and spreadsheets and lots of numbers. So if you're watching from home, feel free to visit there, refresh the page and see what's new for your viewing delight. And we're going to start with our Brad James from the Agency of Education to come up and start talking with us about what we're seeing in our new analysis. And I do want to just start by saying thank you so much to our analysts, Brad James from AOE, Cole, I'm blanking on your last name. Wick from JFO, and Brighton from JFO. They have been incredibly helpful this week and busy getting all of this stuff ready for us. So thank you to all of them. And with that, Brad, do you want to come on up? Not really. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Just kidding. Perfectly happy to be here. Okay, don't move.
So just tell us, we can find them on all the documents on our screen. So just tell us which one you're starting with.
So first of all, just for the record, Brad James, Agency of Education. And we're going to start out with a graph. I think it's called comparison distribution of ELL students or English language learner students. So one of the things that we've been talking about.
It's not called that.
It's not
Comparison of education.
No, it's called English language learner counts and distribution.
Yes. Sorry, I have a different title on my. Everybody find it? My apologies. That's me never keeping up with how names get changed, including my own. So what part of the conversation that's been kind of happening on and off in the task force, and when we have been having our meetings in the background, is what are we doing with the ELL? You had all been talking about doing an ELL grant, a categorical grant, which is what we've been talking about up until this last task force, which was 2 Wednesdays ago, I guess on the 10th. And when Professor Colby and her co-researchers reran the numbers back at the end of October, they broke out, as we talked about, they broke out ELL from poverty, as an ELL was a separate weight. And in the table that Professor Colby sent out to you all and me in that email was a weight of 2.49 for ELL. So the question became, should that be considered a categorical grant still, or should it be run as a weight to see? And we were asked to kind of show it as a weight. So we spent a little bit of time reworking things, running it and putting it into the model so that it comes out as a weight. So before we get to that, what I'd like to direct your attention to is what was it called? Comparison of the two graphs.
ELL counts and distribution.
Okay, ELL counts and distributions. I'll make a note to myself. So on what you're looking at here are two graphs. I don't know, okay, we're not seeing, I'm looking up at the screen, seeing everybody's names and stuff and not what you're looking at. That's fine. If everybody can see it, that's fine.
We can see it.
Okay, that's what
Everybody
counts.
have it up?
All right.
Yeah.
I get confused with this all the time. So the first graph on the left is showing the distribution of the towns that have ELL students. These are FY20 ELL counts. And basically what I'm just simply showing is high to low in that first graph on the left, where these kids are from. Okay, just the distribution. You can see there's a pretty good spike and it tails off pretty quickly. There are 93 towns that have ELL. We're not doing school districts, we're talking about towns. The data came to me as town of residence. So underneath is kind of a split out of where they are. The big line is Burlington. They have 576 ELL students that year. The graph to the right that says is labeled ELL counts, all towns by county is the whole 9 yards, everybody, even those with 0, and it's organized by county. I did not take the time, and I apologize, to break out where the counties were, but down below you can see the count. You see there's a pretty good size grouping. That's Chittenden County. Okay. What I wanted you to see from this is something that Professor Colby had said about ELL students, why she was talking about it making sense to be a categorical grant, is that the ELL is not evenly distributed throughout the state at all. It is very clumpy, as my technical term. And I'm fogging up here. And basically the clump is really, the largest clump is in Chittenden County. The second largest clump is in Washington County. That's kind of that one off to the right that kind of is a little bit of bump, but they had 113 versus Chittenden County's of 1,394. So it's a factor of 10. So Professor Colby's point was that if you put in the weights, put the ELL into weights, remember going back to one of the things I talked about, I think 2 meetings ago, was where I gave that very simple example of 3 districts in a state. What happens when you have weights and you add a new weight and somebody doesn't get it, it impacts them adversely. There were the 3, I think I was sitting right here where we did that one. Okay. That's the exact same thing you're going to see happening here. Because what we're looking at is a high concentration of ELL students in one small area, and then kind of a scattering throughout with a couple pockets. So in terms of that being a categorical grant, in some sense, that makes much more sense, because what that does is it allows you to direct the money to where the kids really are. What you're doing when you're doing it as a weight, more so the way we've been talking about the weighting study in current law, moving forward into current law, is that's just increasing tax capacity to raise more money to pay for these kids. The idea is they're probably being paid for already right now. So
Right. Say that again.
I think the idea is they're probably already being paid for right now. Is that the part?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, because because the school districts, so my fog up day, the school districts are spending what they think they need to be spending to educate these kids. So that cost should be in their budgets and therefore in their education spending. That's what I mean by that. Okay. Any questions on this graph? I really wanted to show it because it's pretty stark as to where these kids are. Okay.
Brad, can you talk about the weight for ELL versus the other weights? I know we had a table of that later, but it's the weight for the ELL in the new calculation is
Sure.
more than twice, it's 2.5 times
Sure.
the poverty weight.
Sure. The poverty weight was the largest weight. All the other weights were down around 0.2, 0.3, somewhere in that range. The poverty weight was a higher weight always, which makes sense because it impacts kids more, I should say. When Professor Colby and the group split that out, it brought that poverty rate down to 1.03, which is what you saw that last run we were doing last week. Okay, that was at 1.03, and we were taking the cost of ELL out because we were presuming it was a categorical grant. So ELL was not captured in any of those other categories, those other factors. So that changed all the weights. But when they looked at ELL itself, it was 2.49. Poverty went down to 1.03. I think it had been, I don't remember what it was, 2.07 or something like that. Okay. So it dropped, but that ELL count went quite a bit higher, or the factor, I should say. And so it's 2.49. So that is over a factor of 2.5 times larger than the next largest one, which is poverty. Okay.
Yeah,
Is that-
that's exactly what
Okay.
I meant, how the weight
Yeah.
shifted.
And so again, remember what that's going to do. Remember, when you're talking about equalized pupils, the way we've been talking about under current law with new factors and different weighting factors, it's a zero-sum game. There are only so many equalized pupils in the state. And so what you're doing by adding factors and having districts that have certain types of kids and some districts don't, is you're shifting within who has the kids, who gets that count. So when you take something with a very large factor like the ELL of 2.49 and a very small grouping of districts that have them, you're shifting a lot of kids to those districts at the expense of all the other districts. I should kids the wrong word, equalized pupils, because they're not real people. It's a weighted number. Okay, but that's what you're doing when this is happening, because it's a zero-sum game.
So I have to ask here,
Senator Hooker.
what is this doing to the tax rate in those towns that have no students?
We're going to come to that, but I will tell you what it's going to do in general is it's going to increase their tax rate.
And it's going to reduce-
Because assuming their spending stays the same, they're losing equalized pupils. That means their cost per pupil goes up, so their tax rate goes up.
And then you talked about the interaction of all the other factors and we'll come to that.
Yeah. The interaction is what makes it really hard to see one individual thing. But what we're going to go to next is, and I'm going to have to walk you through it because there's so much information. I showed the whole thing. Your eyes are going to glaze anyway, but they would glaze if I showed you everything too, if we didn't have a lot of time. What I'm going to show you is basically what we did last time. Okay, which was we ran the model excluding ELL. We used ELL as a categorical grant. Then I'm going to show you more or less the same set of data, but no categorical grant and using ELL as a weight of 2.49. And then we're going to end up at kind of what the taxes are in school districts. Okay. Are there questions before we get to that?
Well, this
Representative
may
Conley?
be better off when we get there, but maybe a little better sort of a timeline of how we have these new weights. And I assume it's just a recalculation as we asked for, and that says that, you know, ELL to reduce a weight is now higher than poverty, whereas previously it wasn't.
Yeah, so you might recall that we made a few decisions. The two main ones were that we decided to go to an additive weight for all of the weights instead of multiplicative for some and additive for the others. So that was one thing. And the second thing was that, and these were preliminary decisions, but these, and then the second one was that we decided to go to a broader measure of poverty from the SNAP measurement that's currently used to the free and reduced lunch, which captures more students in poverty across all of our school districts. And so those two factors changed what the weights were. And so we asked the researchers to rerun the weights with those factors and to tell us what the new weights would be, taking those into consideration. And they did that and gave us the new weights, which then Brad and Deb and Nicole ran to see how they would change. What we saw last time was without the ELL weight and having just ELL as a categorical aid, as we had discussed earlier. We heard from several members of the task force that they wanted to see what it looked like as a weight. So we ran it with, or they ran it with the new ELL weight. And in that memo that we got from Professor Colby and her team, the ELL weight changed to 2.49. So all of this now, what you'll see today is with the new weights that are in the memo from the researchers that explains why the weights changed in reaction to the questions Representative Kornheiser and I and the task force asked the researchers. So the weights you're seeing are the weights from Professor Colby and her team. They're just taking into consideration those two new factors, which are the additive weights and the free and reduced lunch. Make sense? Okay.
And quite explicitly, it's column 4 from the memo, the school-based weights.
Yes, right. They're this. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Representative Kornheiser.
And you remind me, there's one other change that we did, is we moved FRL from the school
Right.
aggregating up to the school district of operation back to the district of residence. So these numbers that you're going to see that I'm saying you saw last time aren't quite the same because of that. FRL students are now back where they come from, where they reside. So they're in their home school district. Now that's where the count is being given, as opposed to what we were talking about last time, where at the school they went to, then aggregated up to the district of operations that ran that school. So if you had, I think we use Granville Hancock as the example. Granville Hancock does not operate a school. When we were talking last time, they got 0 poverty weight because their kids were all at Rochester or Middlebury or Otter Valley or wherever they happened to be going to school. Now they're back at Granville Hancock in this one.
Representative James.
Thank you. Mic to mouth. Just following my instructions. I know there's never an easy answer, but, or maybe we're going to talk about this later, but is there a nutshell answer to why, when we recalculated all of this, according to the October 28th memo, why the ELL weight jumped such a massive amount? Because that's now saying that educating, ELL students costs 3 times as much as students in poverty.
There's not an answer from me. That would be a Professor Colby question and answer. I don't know the data behind it.
Representative Kornheiser.
Professor Colby could explain all the mathematical pieces of it, and there's some of it is explained in the memo. But I think the sort of most obvious thing that's available as a factor is that when we pulled previously, we counted poverty as anyone eligible for food stamps and anyone who was an English language learner. And so previously we were double counting English language learners in the formulas. And so when they pulled it out, so we were actually adequately, accurately measuring poverty, the ELL pullout meant that sort of they weren't being double counted anymore. And sort of the single count got higher. That probably wasn't as clear as it could have been, but it's because we pulled them out of the poverty measure. It's sort of straightforward.
Yeah, that's certainly a factor. And I think one thing to add that's in the original report and also in their memo is that all along the weight for ELL has been probably the most problematic weight, like in terms of how it's calculated because of this distribution effect that Brad is showing us on these charts. Because they're so concentrated in a few school districts, it's harder to get a sort of statistical analysis of that weight because it's concentrated. So in the report, you'll recall they sort of went around a little bit and then they sort of said, maybe we use the regional weight for ELL and that might be the best way. So I think from the very beginning, this weight has been the one that's been the most difficult to calculate. And we're seeing that now in this spike with the weight and how it's interacting with the other weights. Hold up.
Yeah.
Wait, do you have, I'm going to go to Senator Perchik while you mull.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good question from Representative James in that when you look at this, it does make it look like the cost went up. Like the question was like, why did the cost to educate these ELL students go up? But that's the whole thing that we're struggling, that the weights aren't about costs. The weights are just a way to try to get that cost through our complicated formula. And that's why the categorical aid is so much clearer, because it's just like, here's the money you need to teach these children. You to get at that same money through weights, you have to do all these complicated formulas that aren't really connected to the cost is the same either way, but it's just how the math is done is the confusing part.
Wait, Representative James, did you have?
We can move on. I mean,
Okay.
the weights are based on costs and that they reflect the difference in cost factors.
Right. But the costs are the same, whether the weight is 3 or 0.2, the cost is the same. It's just how you do the math to get to the cost, right? And so that's why it can go up and down greatly like that, because it isn't related to I mean, it's related to the cost through the formula, but the cost for the students doesn't change.
Representative Kornheiser.
And so to add on to that, which is a much clearer way of explaining it than I was, thank you. Previously, when we counted ELL as part of poverty, the cost of ELL was divided between 2 weights, which made it a less transparent cost. Now it sits with a single weight.
Got it.
And I just want to go back to what Brad was saying about the poverty counts being in the district of residence versus the district where the students are educated. just to remind you all, our confusing and lengthy conversation last time, where we talked at length about tuition districts and where the money goes, et cetera, et cetera. So what we were hearing from people was that we wanted a comparison based on what is the current law. So current law, those students are counted in their district of residence right now under our current formula, under current law. So this is more of a sort of apples to apples comparison of current law of where those students are actually residing, but not where they're actually going to school. So we still have the question of, is that the way we want to do it moving forward? Do we want to recommend any changes in that? But for now, to look at the data as an apples to apples comparison, we moved those counts back to the district of residence so you can sort of see how it interacts. And just to note, all of these changes that we did from the last meeting was Brad and Nicole's and Deb's time to do this. And so just again, a big shout out to the work they did to get us this data for this meeting. So with that.
Now that you embarrassed me, thank you.
No,
Okay.
So
Teresa, if you could pull up the one that I think called comparison of ELL categorical grant to ELL weight.
we
Or you have it? Oh, you guys have pointed
yeah,
out. Okay.
Teresa doesn't, she already put it there for us to
Okay.
find.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So that's the one we're on now. And it looks like this. They all look like this.
Wait,
but
which
it's
one, what's the name again? What is this?
This one is comparison of ELL categorical grant to ELL weight. Okay. And you should see columns A through M.
Wait, is that the second one on our list?
It's a second.
The second one, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I should go back to putting numbers on things again. So, okay. So this is similar to what you saw last time around. But again, it's revamped a little bit and it's reflecting some changes. Again, it's, and I'm going to go through it column by column so that you know what it is you're looking at, because it's not intuitive. We were trying to figure out how to show you the relevant pieces of information, show you everything you need, and then be able to answer questions with what you're looking at. Hopefully we did that, maybe not. So column A and column B are FY20 base data. Okay, column A is the equalized pupil count for FY20, the actual one that we used, and column B are the FY20 equalized tax rates. Remember, these are not the equalized tax rates that people saw in FY20. They're slightly different because we backed out any Act 46 merge incentive tax rate reductions, and there's a plus minus 5% for the towns. They couldn't go higher or lower, which in fact impact how much money. So what that did by raising those tax rates is it made too much money come into the education fund. So Deb Brighton recalculated the property yield, and it went from, if I remember correctly, 10,648 is what we use in FY22, I think 11,117 or something like that. It went up significantly because the tax rates have gone up. So therefore the yield could go up to bring those tax rates down. And so that the right amount of money is coming into the education fund. That's what is reflected in column B here. So people won't necessarily, nobody will recognize that as their tax rate, as their equalized rate from FY20, because that's not what they were, because of that change in the yield that we use. But it's as close as we can get to apples, bringing in the same amount of money that was needed. Okay. So those are kind of reference columns, those two. Column C is the district ELL counts. You saw it by town on what I was showing you on the graphs. Here I prorated it to the district to where the kids are going to school. Okay, because that's how I was seeing the data, and that's what I had to do. It's not the best way to do it, but that's what we were doing in this limited short period of time we had for this. This is showing the districts going to school. I'm going to use Addison Central because now they are number one, because alphabetically. Oh, I forgot to say, this is organized. This is organized. These sets of data that you're going to be seeing, these tables are organized by county and then alphabetically by district. Okay, I can't find anything now. Okay, because that's not how I think about things. But you guys could probably find things out. So it's organized by county, then alphabetically.
Column with the county that I did not notice somehow. Okay.
Why? Because I didn't point that one out. Okay. And
I
again,
told Brad that senators like counties.
I
and
knew
so
that.
That's
I
why-
knew that. I never think I do it the way I think, which is by supervisory. So Because never mind, you don't know why I'd have to do it that way. So there are numbers to the left that just so you can reference by column. They should be the same throughout all the tables you're going to be looking at today. So Addison Central is now first because they're in Addison County and alphabetical, they are the first one. So they had 15 ELL. I'm in column C now. They had 15 ELL students in FY20. All this is FY20 stuff. Remember. Based on the proposed, I should say, well, I don't know if we would change that proposed or not. Anyway, based on the idea of the ELL grant that you guys have been talking about, that 15 ELL kids would generate an ELL grant of $100,000. That was backed out of their education spending. So column E is a net education spending compared to FY20. If you want to know what their FY20 education spending was, just add column D plus column E. Okay. Okay. And the reason we're doing that is because it's a categorical grant. Categorical grants reduce education spending. They get it later. Okay. It's not part of their tax rate calculation. It actually reduces their tax rate. So column F then is estimated change in education spending with a constant tax rate. So what we did here was we figured out what their new equalized pupil count was. We looked at what their tax rate was in FY20, and we back calculated to how much education spending they could raise with that new equalized pupil count and their old tax rate. And then we compared that to what their account had, to what their education spending had been, and column F is the difference. In the case of Addison Central, they dropped by $1,260,000. They went down. Okay.
Can I interrupt for a sec? And that's because of that push-pull of weights.
Yes. What's happening? So the next column is going to answer that question,
Okay.
Representative Fulman. So the next column is the change in equalized pupils based on that modeling. Okay. And you can see that Addison Central dropped 79 kids, equalized pupils in that modeling. Okay. And so they didn't have as many kids when you're back calculating. So that's why their education spending is lower.
Senator Perchlik.
All other weights are still part of these.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. This good question. I didn't say this. This does not count ELO. This uses a categorical grant instead of an ELO weight. The next half is going to have the ELO weight instead. Okay, but thank you. I did not say that. Okay, is everyone with me so far?
Representative
I
Beck.
just want to be clear. So when you say that all the other weights are counted in here, are you talking about the cost equity performance grants? Or?
No.
No. This is kind of working like current law, where we now have the column 4 weights from Tammy's Professor Colby's latest iteration of weights. We used all the except for ELL. So in this case, poverty is 0.04, secondary is 0.39, middle is 0.36, sparsity is in there. Okay, all those are in there. Okay.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Yep. No, this has nothing to do with cost equity at the moment.
Okay.
That's the next half of the morning. We're talking about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So column G then is the change in equalized pupils. Okay. So you can see they went down from roughly 1796, they lost about 79. So down around, 1790, 1787 or 617, something like that. And then column H is the change in the model tax rate. Okay, what pops out with this new equalized pupil count and education spending less the categorical grant. This is the change their equalized tax rate. Okay, so you can see in this case, their pupil count went down and column H shows their tax rate goes up 1.5 cents in this model.
Senator Perchlik.
Thank you. Is that I'm not clear on what H is saying. Is that saying the rate would go up to make up for that 1.25 million that going down?
No. That's another good question. So if you go back to column E, and that's their net education spending, because we backed out the categorical grant they're going to get later.
Yeah.
That's their education spending, 31.3. You would divide it by that reduced pupil count of roughly 17, roughly. You're not seeing that number, but that's adding A and G together. And that would translate with the yield into a new tax rate that would be 1.5 cents higher.
Right, yeah.
Okay, there's a lot going on
But
here.
they lost the student, their rates.
They lost students and so their rates go up.
Equal.
Yep, yep, because we're presuming that spending stays constant in this model. Okay.
And just so you know, we went around and around on which columns to show you because we didn't, if you show every single column, it just becomes completely overwhelming. So hopefully these are the right columns.
And then we can talk about what's going on. You know, it's not intuitive. I'll grant you that. You know, little of my world is sometimes. So do people have kind of a grasp of what they're seeing for columns C through H?
Yep.
Okay, and so we're just showing everybody in the state. That's everybody's listed down there. So I'm sure you've already gone and looked at your counties and your districts and everything. But anyway, they're all here. So then now the next section, starting with column I, now what we've done is we have now added in the ELL weight of 2.49, but discarded the ELL categorical grant. Okay, if you have the weight, there is no categorical grant.
Oh, Representative Kornheiser.
For me, when I look at this, and maybe this doesn't help other people's brains, but it helps my brain, so I'm just gonna say it out loud in hopes it helps other people's brains. I could think of between column H and column I want to put a really, really thick black line because it's almost as if they're completely different tables.
And they
Is
are.
that, okay.
Yeah, they are. I tried to make that black
It's
line.
clear here. I just want to make it,
I could have made
I
it
just
even
want-
bigger, I think, but
I just want to say it aloud. It's not.
yes, no,
it's not
that,
a dramatic
no,
suggestion.
no, you're right. I try.
It's a conceptual communication.
As I said, I do pretty when it comes to spreadsheets.
No, this was not.
It-
It was not.
No,
about
no,
that.
but you're quite right, and that's good to point out. Columns C through H are they kind of do have a bigger, darker border around them. I don't know if you can see on what you're looking at, but they do. But and that's one set of data. And then column I through M is another set of data on the other side of that semi-black line, as Representative Kornheiser pointed out. Okay, so she's quite right. It is they're separate. Okay. Okay, so again, columns I through M, ELL weight of 2.49, no ELL categorical grant. So education spend is back up to where it was in FY20. So column I now is showing the district ELL weights, the additional weight people got based on the 2.49 category or weighting factor. That's the additional weight. So in Addison Central,
Equalization.
yes, yes, it adds, it's hard to say what they really are, but yes, it's going to go to those equalized pupils. Yes, it's an addition factor. So they're gaining just over 37. Okay. Column J is what the FY20 education spending was. Again, it's column D plus E together, but that's what there was. And then again, same idea. You calculate the tax rate, you figure out, okay, what's going on? Here's their new tax rate. Here's their new equalized pupil count, and you back calculate to what the education spending could have been at the flat at the frozen tax rate of FY20, that dollar in the column B, 1.618. And then you compare that to what their education spending was. In this case, Addison Central would raise $1.9 million less at the same tax rate, but with the new equalized pupil count. And again, if you go to the next column over, column L, that shows you the change in equalized pupils. They dropped 110. Okay, before they had dropped 79, now they're dropping 110. What does that tell you about EL students and where they are? They're not there. There's some, obviously there's some, but there are not many there when it gets to the state as a whole. So here's where we're talking about what's happening. And then when you look at the change in the tax rate, again, you go through the whole rigmarole. Here's your new equalized pupil count. Here's your education spending. Here's your new tax rate with whatever it happens to be. And it turns out to be 6.6 cents higher than what they had in column B in FY20.
Is everyone following along? Any questions for Brad at this point? Are there other districts that you want to walk you through, or did you have another district you wanted to?
No,
Can
I
you show
will.
the Kingdom choice?
excuse me,
Kingdom Choice. will you take
Kingdom
that?
Choice, yes, they are 19, oh, they're Essex, is that where they are?
I have no idea.
I think they're in Essex.
And I
Yeah.
scrolled.
Yes,
scrolled
yes,
away from
line,
them now.
line 38, Northeast Kingdom Choice. Okay, everybody line 38?
Mhm.
Okay, so their initial equalized pupil count in FY '20 was 289, just over, and their initial tax rate was at 1.7. Okay, everybody looking at the right numbers? 1.703 for the tax rate, okay. All right, they have no ELL students, therefore they have no ELL grant, column C and D. Their education spending in FY '20 was 5.3 million. Using the weights without ELL, okay, no ELL grant, or pardon me, I apologize, no ELL weight, okay? So we're not counting ELL students here. We using the new number of equalized pupils and back calculating, they could only raise at the same tax rate $842,000 less. They would drop. Their equalized pupil count went down almost 27, 26.93. And their tax rate in this model goes up 26 cents.
And again, just to reiterate what I think somebody else said, 26 cents does not reflect trying to raise the loss of 842. It is just a result of the math.
That's right. That's right. Correct.
So if you wanted to keep your spending level, it would be even more, if you need to make up for that $842,000 loss, that tax rate would be even higher.
Yes. Yes. And that would be that tax rate, probably an additional 26 cents, it looks like, would be my guess, to make up for that.
Representative Beck.
I just have they're Northeast Kingdom Choice is north of me, but, and doesn't surprise me, they don't have any ELL students, but they have a lot of poverty up there and a lot of scarcity. I'm a little surprised that would overpower the loss in ELL. I mean, is that district getting the additional weighting for poverty? And the additional
It should be. My computer's there.
I know these are just.
Yeah. No, I mean,
It's really surprising.
no, I understand the question because I'm looking at the second half of this, and that's not what I was expecting it to do. And sometimes that's what happens. What you expect to do isn't what happens. I would need to go in and look at each category and see. We can do that. That's not a problem to do. It's just, it's just not.
Surprising given
Yeah.
the poverty and the scarcity.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at it going, I'm not sure I understand what's going on here.
Would it have to do with the fact that there just simply aren't that many students there?
It could, I honestly don't know. It's how everything plays out. It all gets twisted up and interacts with each other.
I don't know why I'm raising my hand,
know.
but I was waiting for Brad to call on me, actually, which is kind of.
I could do that. I'll put my old school teacher hat on and say,
Brad, I have a
yes,
question.
yes, Marty.
Well, so, and just looking at this, what surprises me is the difference between the first and the second. It doesn't surprise me that they're going to be losing tax capacity under this model because the ELL weight is so high. And so what I would have expected is from the first part to the second part, they would actually go the other way.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I thought,
I think
but
there's probably some noise in there or something.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to look because I'm not quite following. I mean, intuitively, I don't quite understand what's happening in columns I through M.
Yeah.
I thought maybe I had the right data here to show it, but apparently I don't.
Well, you might, I mean, so.
I think we need more information from the background.
Yeah.
What I haven't done is I haven't set up the file so that you could say, pick a district and here's the whole thing right there.
Mhm.
And I know there was a really weird Act 46 thing that happened up there as far as the tax rate and the whole marketing. There were some very strange things that happened up in that district.
I think what you're referring to in terms of the tax rates up there, because there were, is some districts had really low tax rates, some districts had really high tax. They were all over the place.
Yeah.
And so when they came out, when they unified the tax rate, kind of a weighted average, is kind of in the middle with the new. And so people were coming up and coming down, but they could only move by no more than 5% either way. I think that's probably what you're thinking, because I know that that did make things. I'm gonna have to look, see what's happening, because I truly do not know.
Are there other districts that you want Brad to walk you through?
Can we look at one of the districts that has a lot of students? Like
Sure.
Winooski or?
Sure.
Burlington?
Winooski would be in that one, I know. Okay, it's line 31. We're all on the front page, that's good. So Winooski starts out in column A with 991 equalized pupils and a tax rate of $1.41. They have 247, column C, 247 ELL students, ELL students, which gives them an ELL grant of 1.26 million. And so their net ed spending is 13.8 million. With the new equalized pupil count and a flat tax rate of $1.40, they would not be able to raise as much money. They'd be $690,000 short from where they were. That's because going to column G, they're losing 44 kids. So that would explain the drop in spending. But their tax rate still manages to go down 9 cents in column H. Again, yeah, maybe we don't have enough information on the sheet to show, so I'll do some background work at some point so that we can see things more clearly. Then if we go to now, we add the ELL weights in. So there are 247 ELL students in column C, translates to 615 because of the 2.49 factor in column I. Their ed spending is where it was at 15.1 million. They can now raise, because now they have more equalized pupils, so they can now raise an additional $4.6 million on the same tax rate. And it shows, column L shows they gained 305 equalized pupils. Okay, again, remember, they're one of the ones where all these equalized or these ELL students are. And their tax rate drops 36 cents.
Senator Purchase.
So just to get that right there, in the first model, they dropped 44 equalized pupils. In the other one, they gained 300.
Mm-hmm.
What about Kingdom East?
Caledonia?
Sure, yeah. I have
Yep, no, it is.
Sorry.
It's line 19, Caledonia.
Still on the first page.
I know, this is great. I actually remember the county too. So line 19, Kingdom East in Caledonia County. They have 1,888 equalized pupils and a tax rate of $1.46. Column C, they had 15 ELL students. That translates into a grant of 100,000, just like it did for Addison Central. Their net spending in FY20 was 29,700,000 roughly. They could with how the first one works with the categorical grant, no ELL weight, they could raise an additional $2.74 million with their new equalized pupil number on that same tax rate of $1.46. They gained 163 students and their tax rate would drop using, going backwards, using their tax rate dropped 16.5 cents. If we continue over into column I, I'm still on the right row, their 15 students translates into 37.35 weighted ELL students. Their ed spending is 29.8 because there's no categorical grant this time. They could raise, instead of $2.7 million on the same tax rate, they could raise $1.9 million on the same tax rate. They gain 122 equalized pupils instead of 163, and their tax rate drops 12.7% their cents versus 16.5. So it's all what's happening, how the weights are getting distributed, and we're moving around inside the equalized pupil calculation.
Senator Purchase.
Thank you. Is there the ability to compare this chart with the chart we saw last time of the equity rate formula, or are there other differences that wouldn't allow a comparison?
You could certainly pull them together. You just need the 2 Excel files and then just figure out a way to pull them together, which is not hard to do because in the background, I always hide things that I use to pull things around with.
We are later looking at the cost equity formula option and comparing, doing some
And
comparisons.
I don't remember if Deb did the same thing we did last time. This time, I don't recall.
Yeah. Are there other districts or questions at this point? Does this, to the extent that any of this makes sense, is just making sense?
Yeah,
Scott,
I
Representative
I
Beck.
think the thing that's really important for everybody to remember is when you're going through these, is that there's these layers of scarcity and, I mean, these are, in some of these cases, I can tell you for King and East, those are overwhelming factors of the ELL, and that's why you're seeing what you're seeing. It's not just the ELL thing going on.
No, I agree. It's not, but I think the point that is that this is such a skewed distribution that's really impacting everything.
Representative Kornheiser.
What I feel very aware of lately when I look at it, how the distribution shifts with each new factor, is that with the report, we had this really explicit acknowledgement that we have districts all around the state with very specific students with very specific needs that have very specific financial needs attached to them. And just because another district has a different need doesn't take away from the need in that first district. And with the weights, the way that they redistribute everything, it really, I feel like we've acknowledged, like, yes, you need this, and then, but because someone else might need it more because of a different reason, you don't get that thing that we said out loud that you need. And that's what, every time I watch the redistribution, that's what I get sort of frustrated by, that we acknowledge this desperate need and then under the weights are not meeting it for a lot of districts. And that's why that's why I get excited about the cost equity formula, even though it's complicated and there's a lot more work to do on it.
All right, anything else people want to add at this point? All right, deep breaths. What's next, Brad?
Well, I think where time? Okay, I can speak as long as I thought I would. How unusual. I think since we kind of went into ELL, I think I'll start with what Deb and I are going to kind of talk about, because the second half of the morning is going to be more Deb, I think, talking about the cost equity model. So I think what we want to talk about now is kind of the detail behind what you're seeing here. This is going beyond just calculations of equalized pupils and is going through the tax rate calculation. What I'd like to go is, excuse me, is take a step back and just kind of look at more detail now about what is happening at each district in terms of the weighting factors themselves. Okay, so that would be the set of tables that says, I wrote this one down, weighting detail with and without ELL.
Is that under a poll?
Yes, it's under.
Okay,
Yes.
great, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
The third one.
I should have said that. It's under a call.
You're sitting on it.
Okay. Everybody there?
More columns. We go to R.
More columns than we go to R.
Application of model,
Good thing with the,
no ELL.
Is everyone there?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so now you're looking at something that goes through A through R. Okay. Up at the top says application of model weights, no ELL. Then we'll bring the ELL in a moment. But the first ones I just kind of split them out so we not see those at first. Because I wasn't going to talk about it quite the way I did. But
Sorry,
now
Brad.
it's okay. It's good for me. It makes me think on my feet. So again, we're looking at the same set of districts on the left-hand side. Each number is the same as on the other ones, by county, alphabetical within the county. Okay. Okay. So what we are not showing in here, excuse me, here is we are not showing pre-K. Okay, because pre-K was not part of the charge of the study nor charge of the task force necessarily. So we did not show it. It's in the background. Whoops, when I get to the equalized pupils, but I'm not showing it here because nothing's changed with them. Okay, so what you're looking at is basically everything's a set of two columns. You get the count of students within a category, and then you get the weight, and then that's what we're doing here. So columns A and B are for the middle school. All right, within the middle school, when you look at grades 6 through 8, the cohort LT-ADM, sorry, there are lots of, well, it's not too many initials, but LT-ADM means long-term average daily membership. Okay, rolls off the tongue.
And that's really close to humans, right?
Sort of, it's a 2-year average. It's a 2-year average plus state placed. So it's
like pretty close.
sort of close. It's closer to humans than equalized pupils are. How's that? Okay, it's closer to humans that way. ADM itself 1 year is even closer, but so what you're looking at in column A or whichever ones we're talking about where I said long-term ADM, what you're looking at is you're really looking at 2-year average plus state placed kids for each school district. That's what you're looking at. So in the case of Addison Central, again, because they're first alphabetically in Addison County, their middle school cohort, grades 6 through 8, has 384 students in it. The weighted ADM, that's what WTD ADM at the top means in column B, is weighted ADM, has a factor, their weighting factor is 0.36. Okay, put those in up at the top. So that they get an additional 138 for their middle school students. Okay, so if you take 0.36 multiplied by 384, you get that 138. The next set of columns, C and D, is the high school. The secondary weight, that's grades 9 through 12. And they have 525 students in that cohort. When you multiply by a weight of 0.39, it's 204, almost 205 additional students. Everybody seeing how this is working? Okay. So far, so good. All right, columns E and F are free and reduced lunch, FRL counts, or free and reduced price lunch, technically, which I never put the P in. And again, remember, these are at the district of residence. So Addison Central has 504 at a weight of 1.03. That gives them an additional 519. G and H is the first sparsity factor. This is one where you have a population of less than 36 people per square mile. This is not school related. This is just population. That doesn't work for Addison Central, okay? They have a few more than that. So they get no weight. Sparsity 2, and I didn't put that at the top, I meant to, I forgot. Sparsity 2 is less than 55 people per square mile, but greater than or equal to 36 people per square mile. Addison Central doesn't fit that one either. Sparsity 3, they do, they show up. Okay, sparsity 3 was less than 100 people per square mile, but greater than or equal to 55 people per square mile. So they fit into that category. So they get their long-term ADM is 1,811. So that's that number that's there. The factor for there is 0.07. So multiply those two numbers together, and you get an additional 126 students added in. Columns M and N.
I'm sorry, Representative James, thank you.
So that's just, if we were calling that humans, those are just the number of humans they have.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that 1,800, yes.
Okay, and the reason that middle school plus high school doesn't add up to that is because elementary students. are not-
Elementary school and pre-K students. Yep, exactly. Again, I tried to not show.
No.
Yes, yep. Okay, so then the M and N, I have to speak that one slowly, is the small schools grant, okay? And both small schools grants, so M and N and O and P, so M through P, that's easier to say, are based on a sparsity factor of less than 55 students or 55 people per square mile. So if you have a small school, but you're in a town that has a higher density than that, then you don't get it.
You said grant, but you meant weight.
Yes, I did, didn't I? Thank you, Weights. I still have the old school of what I do currently. But yes, Weights, thank you very much. So the first one, column M, the cohort of enrollment for small schools with less than 100 kids in a district that has a sparsity of less than 55, they don't qualify. So they get 0 in column N. In column O, this small school size is 250, is less than 250, but more than or equal to 100 enrollment. Same sparsity, less than 55. They don't qualify for that one either.
One epiphany that I had later, probably than I should have, that I'm going to share, is that for when we count poverty or ELL, we count just the students in that school that are living in poverty or ELL. But for the rural weights and the small school weights, we count every single student in that school or in that.
You're half right. For the sparsity weights, the rural weights, we count everybody. For the small school grants, we count the students enrolled in the small school. So it's not the whole population of the district. It's just those people in the school. And you can see that it shows up actually if you go down to line 4, Mount Abe, which was the first one of the other ones. In the first cohort in column N, they actually have one school that has a population of an enrollment of 77, and they're getting 16, an additional 16 for that. The weight is 0.21. They have, I think it was 4 schools that had a combined enrollment that was between 250 and 100. They had a combined enrollment of 646. And so they get 0.07 of that, so that's 45. So the small school one is by the enrollment of the schools themselves. The sparsity itself, though, so those 3 weights for sparsity are by the whole population of the district. Okay, so that kind of gets us up through column P. So column Q then is adding up all the ADM. Okay, so it's adding up column B, D, F, H, J, L, N, P, and it's adding up well, it's decreasing because of pre-K. So pre-K gets subtracted out, and it's adding in the long-term ADM of that 1,800 in Addison Central's place. So when all is said and done, the long-term weighted average for Addison Central, column Q, is 2,696. They started out at 1,800. That's in column K. So they've added quite a few. Up in that little section there, right under Q and R, I'm actually showing you the calculation of the equalization ratio in case you care. Okay. The 87,493 is the long-term ADM for the state. When you take all these weights, add them together, you get 137,409. So you divide those 2 numbers and you get a ratio of 0.63674. That's the equalization ratio. And that's the number that gets multiplied by any number in column Q to get you column R, which is the equalized pupil count, the revised equalized pupil count. So when you take that for Addison Central, and you take that 2696 and multiply it by basically 0.637 roughly, you get 1,716 students, equalized students in this model.
Let's pause here for a second. Senator Perchlik.
Thank you. Why K, column K for that first row that we were looking at, why isn't that number the addition of column A and C? That's the way I would think it would work, that you would take all the middle school students and all the high school students, and that would be, well, it doesn't have to be K, but G, I, and K together.
Because what you're not seeing in here, because there is no weight for element, I moved away, I got comfortable. What you're not seeing here is you're not seeing the elementary kids, K through 5. Okay, you're not seeing them, and you're not seeing the pre-kids.
I thought it was just pre-K, so any elementary.
No, yeah, they're only showing up in column Q. I didn't break them out as a separate column. Okay.
Representative Conlon.
Brad, how hard would, this is a policy decision, but we need some mathematic breakup with it. Because when we get into the whole sparsity issue, that's really a replacement for small schools grants. And many of these districts are receiving small schools grants in the form of merger support grants.
Wait, I'm going to stop you right there because we are going to talk about this later and we have sort of various options to work through. And depending on what we decide to do, we can then model it or whatever.
1 p.m.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. Anyone else right now? Senator Perchlik.
Well, given your answer to my last question, what do you think the main takeaway of this is? Is it Q and R?
Yes, it's Q and R. This is just kind of showing what's happening. This is kind of going back to Representative Beck's question about what was going on with Northeast Kingdom choice.
Yeah, but this isn't any really different than it's happening
No, this is just kind of showing you all the detail behind everything. You really haven't necessarily seen before, based on this latest round of assumptions that we're modeling here. So just one thing to say is, and Deb's going to get into this later on, is one thing to say is that we're really kind of talking about two paths here. Okay, we're talking about current law where you take the equalized pupils, take spending, and you calculate tax rate, and that increases or decreases people's tax capacity with the new weights that are being talked about in this task force. All right, that's kind of, I'll call it kind of the current law model, for lack of a better term. Then there's the cost equity model, which is looking at the weights are used, but they're used to develop a dollar amount, and then the dollar amount is given back to the districts, and then it kind of goes from there. So we have these two paths that start diverging, but what they do is they start out at the same place, okay? And they do everything the same up through column Q. Because and Deb will talk about this, I think, what Deb is doing is Deb is taking those total weights. We're doing the weighting in the background, in her case, in the cost equity model. We're doing the weight in the background and getting the long-term weighted ADM for the state. That gives you kind of a base pupil amount. And then the factors are applied against that base pupil amount. That's where you're getting those dollars that she was backing out in terms of the cost equity, what we had been talking about last week. So up through column Q is where the two things go side by side. And then they start diverging, because then the current law model, the one that I've been dealing with, starts at column R, because I need the equalized pupil counts, the revised equalized pupil counts, to go in and do the tax rates.
All right,
Okay.
it's making sense. Are there other districts you want Brad to walk you through? To show this?
Yeah, I would, I've been particular, yes, let me pick one random one. that is not- St. Albans.
St. Albans. Franklin, thank you. I was getting there. I was thinking.
Maple Run.
Maple Run? Yeah, so that's Maple Run. That's 39. Everybody there? Okay. They had 424, almost 425 middle school students, 6 through 8. Factor of 0.36 gives them an additional almost 189 students. They had 677 9 through 12 students. The weighting factor of 0.39 gives them an additional 264. Their FRL count is just over 1,000, 1,002. And at a weight of 1.03, they get an additional 1,032 counts or students, bodies, ADM, whatever you want to call them. Sparsity does not apply to them at all. Okay, so from columns G through L, there's 0. And then they do not have a small school. So columns M through P are 0. When you add up all their weights, their pre-K LT, their pre-K students and their, I should say, long-term ADM, and their elementary students, and then all the weights, you get a total of 3,907 in column Q. Times that 0.637 equalization ratio, it drops that down to a count of about 2,487. And I don't know what they started at. We'd have to look on that other sheet. I could tell you. Oh, that's got Morris Grant. Okay. Maybe I can tell you. They started out at 2,552. And so they're dropping a little bit in this model.
2001.
Go ahead.
You're not going to, you won't see 2,552 on this. Yeah, I went back to the one we were talking about first.
Yes, I was just going to ask I was just going to ask what column that is on the first thing, but I will
B.
find it, so-
I know, pardon me, A.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other ones people want to see?
Okay, then I will
Okay.
direct your
Go ahead.
attention down to page 1, 2, 3, 4, because these are two things added together. And what you're going to see is something that is truncated, but now shows columns Q through V. Everybody see that? Okay, so same district, same order. And Q and R are exactly what you just saw on that first set of data. Okay, what's happening now here, where there's a black line there, okay, between R and S, there's a bold black line or attempted bold black line. Columns S through V now are showing the addition of the ELL as a weighting factor of 2.49. So I kind of separated them out so you can see here's what it is before, here's what it is after. So again, using Addison Central as the example, column Q is that 2696, their total long-term average, weighted average, and then they had roughly 1,716 equalized pupils. Now, if we go to the ELL, their ELL was 15. That turns into a weight of 37.35 at 2.49 weighting factor. When all is said and done, that gets added into every column Q basically, and you come up with a new total weighted ADM with ELL this time of 2,733. If you look up below column U and V and compare it to Q and R, you'll see that the numerator is the same, 87,493, but the weight, the long-term weighted number has changed. It went from 137,409 to 141,841. Let me try English now. 141,841 students. So that ELL has pushed the long-term weighted count up, okay? And so the equalization ratio drops from 63.7 to 61.7. So it drops almost 2 percentage points. And what that does for Addison Central is it takes their long-term weighted ADM with ELL in column Q of 2733 and drops it down to an equalized pupil count with ELL weight of 1,686. Which is compared to what in column R, 1716. So they lost roughly 30 kids because of ELL. How the ELL shifts everything around within the calculation. Okay. So that's what I was trying to show you here on this sheet. I was trying to get rid of all the stuff from, we could have put it all in one sheet. I was trying to keep it a little more separate so you could see it, but that's basically what you're seeing here.
Are there questions here, or do you want to see other districts? Or talk about other? Okay. Perfect. Yeah, this is great timing. Do you
Okay.
have anything else to add in conclusion? And
Well, it's only my personal opinion. So, I mean, going back to the graphs, ELL is focused in certain areas, largely in one area, and then in a couple of other smaller areas to a lesser degree. Again, as we've seen with, forgetting this, when you go back to the very simple model that I showed you a couple times ago, where I had 3 districts and they said you just had a secondary weight, and then we added in a sparsity weight, and you saw that it changed things. They didn't have sparsity. That's what's happening here. If you choose to do an ELL weight, it's going to adversely affect those districts, which is going to be the vast majority, because they don't have an ELL student, or they're way below the state average. And so they're going to be adversely affected in terms of their count, which in turn, under the current law model, goes to their tax rate too. So I think there's a lot of argument to be made for ELL as a categorical grant.
okay, I think unless there are questions for Brad, we're going to take a, how many minute break? A 15-minute break. And then we're going to come back and talk about more with Brad, and also adding Deb Brighton in to talk about the weighting model and the cost equity model discussion. So we'll look at more fun charts